when I think about talent shortages, I'm not talking about people to come in and do effectively a transactional job well. I'm talking about executives who can lead us out of this disruption. If we return to the fact that maybe, I'm proposing it might be a fact that the talent shortage is actually finding warm bodies to do the transactional type of activities, would I be right in assuming it could be about wages and benefits? If you up the wage, you land the people who are efficient at doing what you want them to do, or maybe is there something else in play? Welcome and thank you for joining me today. My name is Gary Newbury. I'm a senior executive on call helping businesses in the make, move, sell flow of consumer goods and services. My purpose is to inspire business leaders, particularly those within the consumer products and retailing space, to think big, be bold, scale, adapt and win, one epic supply chain transformation at a time. There's additional content available through my website, RetailAID.ca, or on my YouTube channel, RetailAID. Be sure to check it out. As the business world faces much volatility, uncertainty, complexity, and ambiguity, organizations need to be tapping into resources with an inside edge on transitioning their teams to be agile, innovative, and digital, with thought leaders, experts, and senior executives who have mastery of operational turnarounds and strategic transformations to help reorientate their enterprises. There's great material to get through here, so let's get started. Hello, everybody. Welcome to RetailAID podcast channel. I've got Tatiana with me today, but just as an introduction to myself, in case you're unaware of what I do, I'm a senior exec on call specializing in rapid performance improvement across the retail supply chains and the last mile. And for the sake of this discussion, the retail supply chain includes manufacturing, third-party logistics, wholesaling, retailing, and the last mile. So it's the whole collective consumer products driven supply chain. So I've got the pleasure of having Tatiana with us today, and we're going to go through a series of questions to really get into the nitty-gritty of where recruitment stands right now. We're in October 2021. We're facing a peak which has never been seen before in terms of both volume demanded and a whole range of supply chain issues, preventing retailers perhaps maximizing their benefits of that huge demand spike.
Good morning, Gary. Thank you very much for inviting me to your podcast. It's an honor to be here and to share my experience, my observations with you today that's related to recruitment. I specialize in supply chain logistics, recruitment, headhunt, and the company I represent is Unicorn Experts. That's my company that I started in 2019. I'm happy to contribute to our discussion, and definitely I encourage audience to stay tuned because we will share some insights that may help you either in your job search or in hiring talent for your team, whether you're in retail or in other industries. I think you will find some very useful information today.
Yeah, stay tuned is the right message, because this is an area which I'm very, I wouldn't say confused about. We are seeing extensive disruption, but I'm not seeing the kind of allied set of recruitment of senior leaders to go in to help companies. So I'd be interested to get some real perspective emerging from this conversation. So Tatiana, you're a supply chain expert for many years in the consumer-driven supply chain, and one day you were inspired to become a full-blown recruiter. I mean, it's standing here, it's not a natural inclination for me, but for you, something inspired you to open that door, push through it, step through it, and importantly, keep at it. So tell me a little bit about that journey and also what keeps you going every day.
Thank you, Gary, for that question, because that's something that I certainly did not plan for myself when I started my career in supply chain. And along that journey, and right now being a recruiter, I see that supply chain professional, what they crave the most is recognition. Supply chain professionals work really hard. They go through a tremendous amount of stress. and they barely see the results of their work. They don't see how their work impacts other people. And that's what I define as fulfillment. So I worked in supply chain for many years, for 8 years. And of course, when I was about to make that transition, there was a lot to leave behind. I was certified by APEX. I had my CPIM. I had a pretty good title of a supply chain manager. And for many people, that would remain an anchor to stay in the industry. For me, I was on the search for fulfillment. And also when I came to that decision, I was taking a small break from my work. I was on maternity leave. So it was something that I had some time to think through and to plan ahead in both financial aspect and mental aspect as well. So I came into recruitment not out of despair or money. I came into recruitment because that's what I really wanted in terms of, you know, what I wanted to give back and what I believed would make me a happy professional, a happy person. And looking back at my life, honestly, and I know it will sound pathetic, but I can see how I was being moved in that direction by all that experience that I went through, as if it's like a career that I was meant to do since I was born. And honestly, looking back, I can see how that experience, whether it's supply chain or university I went through, interviews, multiple interviews I went through myself as a candidate, that experience shaped my character. It shaped me as a recruiter who cares about people. It certainly developed my empathy. And the final decision, why did I actually decide to go into recruitment? Trust me, I tried many things, crazy things, because I was on the lookout for that experience, for that activity that's going to give me fulfillment. And one day I helped my father-in-law to find a job in North America. And I found that tailoring the resume, applying for jobs, calling the companies was not really draining me. In fact, it gave me that boost of energy that I was craving. So since I was paying attention to all the emotions I was going through every day, because I was, as I said, on the lookout for that fulfillment, I thought, well, I'm not really losing much. I'm at home. I'm not earning a lot of money. We still managed to have roof over our heads and food on the table. I decided to try it. Honestly, that was not a very difficult decision to make, but it took me years to come to that decision.
I think that many people struggle with their own career choices. Sometimes they fall into something. You suggested you fell into supply chain. I suspect you've got some natural attributes which lend themselves towards being a top performer in that area. But often we find we're driven by our skills rather than our passion. I suspect that your passion has taken you through into recruitment where, as you say, you give back, but I think you're a really people-centered individual. That doesn't necessarily always sit comfortably in a world of supply chain.
Yes, that's true. And also, Gary, I want to add a small remark. I speak with professionals in supply chain who rate themselves as top performers, A-type personality. And for those people who are good at many things, they've been A+ students in many subjects, it's extremely challenging what it is exactly that they want to do, what it is exactly that they are good at. So it takes extra effort, because if you have high standards and expectations of yourself, if your parents, your school had high expectations of you, you end up fulfilling those expectations, and that of course kills authenticity.
Thanks for sharing your journey today. So in terms of recruitment, if I think about the last 18, 19 months, are you seeing any noticeable trends in what employers are asking for as we head towards post-pandemic or even roaring 2020s? Or do you think maybe they're still using tools, job specs and thought patterns from, dare I call it, the boring 2010s?
Well, Gary, I can only speak based on my practice and clients that engage me to search for talent for them. What I see is that employers emphasize the importance of entrepreneurial approach to the business. They are now looking for individuals who want to own the role, who are open to do end-to-end supply chain, for example, because you can no longer, it's not narrow anymore. Every function demands that you are open and you are curious about what's going on in other areas of business. So that entrepreneurial approach is definitely becoming a must-have, which of course makes my job more difficult. And another word that I hear a lot from my clients is they want people who can come up with solutions. So solutions is something that they expect you to come up with, being a good problem solver. And of course, searching for that ability, we need to redo our interview process. I may rethink my behavioral questions that I ask, because how do you identify that this person is solution oriented and this is not? When candidates are desperate, they will say yes to almost any question that you ask. And it requires some personal life experience to see through those answers and basically look straight to the core. So solutions, entrepreneurial approach, and of course, people who are comfortable with uncertainty, who can remain calm under high pressure, who can handle high expectations of themselves. That's what's required.
And of course, communication skills. We sometimes
goes without saying, but
it's easy to leave it off a page, but you bump into it really quickly. It's one thing, I think it's really good to have people who can theorize solutions, but the big job ahead for all functions in a business is how do you articulate that and empower your colleagues to buy into this and get the whole organization to move forward. So you alluded to a few areas of improvement that some employers might need to do. You talked about their cognitive questions. How do you discern people who want to say, oh yeah, I'm great at solutions, from most people who actually might say that, but are actually no good at it? So could you just give us perhaps, if you can, a quick example of how we might structure one of those questions in a different way than we did in the 2010s to the 2020s?
Yes, definitely. I like asking behavioral questions, and I think, of course, every case is unique and depending on what industry you are in and what specifically you're looking for. But I like asking for, please give me an example when you had to come up with unexpected solution, when you had to solve the problem and you did not know the outcome, you could not predict the outcome of your actions, and you were willing to take responsibility for consequences. So I see how they respond to that and whether or not they have enough examples to tell me. And also I pay attention to small details like, is this person blaming circumstances? Is this person blaming other people? I pay attention to whether or not they are willing to take responsibility for their action, how self-aware they are. And that comes through how they present themselves, how they communicate before the interview even starts. So definitely I encourage employers and recruiters to pay attention to those minor details that can contribute to the whole portrait of the person that is sitting in front of you. Pay attention to their narrative and you will be able to learn way more without even asking those tough questions. Of course, then it becomes more difficult to explain to the candidate why we think he or she is not a match, because it's not easy to dispute soft skills, right? If you tell someone that I don't think you are a solution-oriented person, most likely you will hear back, what do you mean? You don't know me. So yes, it requires a lot of diplomacy and creativity, but be more select. And I like asking, can you tell me an example when you had to do something in your job that was really not on your job description, that you were not expected to do? And I see how people respond to them. Do they care about business in general, or they only care about what they are expected to do?
Some good hints there for people who are in the process of recruiting or about to recruit, and obviously for candidates thinking about how do I prepare for difficult questions which are more 2020s orientated than perhaps some of the stuff that emerged from the Great Recession when there was a huge pool of people looking for work. So talking about that whole situation of before and after, effectively, there's been several headlines hitting the press about the Great Resignation. I've heard different things about this. I've talked to people who are looking at some of the data, and it seems to be people who were close to retirement age who sat during perhaps lockdowns or restrictions, sat at home, went to work from home, and suddenly came to a conclusion that maybe they didn't really want to go back to work. They would take maybe earlier retirement than they had originally planned. But that's just one aspect of this whole complex problem summed up in that super slogan, the Great Resignation. I'd be interested to hear what your thoughts are on the topic as an insider to maybe seeing this actual dynamic playing out.
And Gary, thanks for that question. And I will be completely honest, because I do not feel the effect of Great Resignation, at least directly. I do not feel it in my job, because jobs that I'm working on are urgent to be filled. And people that I talk to, they are either desperate, they're actively looking for work, or they are open to consider a change. But what I see, though, is that the response rate from passive candidates, those who are happily employed, that are not applying for jobs online, that are not networking, the response rate from passive candidates is significantly lower these days than it used to be in a pre-pandemic world. I think it dropped about 20%, which shows that, yes, there are talented people in the market, but they're not available. They are either afraid of a change, they don't want to make moves during these days, they're comfortable with their current employers. So I don't really know the reason why, I can only guess, but the response rate is lower. When I go outside of my office, I see how different areas of life are short-staffed. I had to fly to the United States in August, and Pearson was extremely short-staffed. We almost missed the flight. And I see how in the restaurants, sometimes they apologize for their staff not being trained enough because they're new hires. So definitely I see how areas of business, some of those areas suffer, but I also, in my work, to be honest, I do not see that. I also see that the cost of living is going high and people are desperate for money. They are looking for a better deal. They prioritize money over everything else, which of course increases risks of counteroffers and other things that recruiters don't like to deal with.
It seems, at least in Ontario, the risk of another lockdown has made some employers ask their teams to continue to work from home, or at least if they're asking them to come back to the office, actually spend as least time at the office as possible. So hybridize into maybe one day a week in the office, as opposed to their expectation might be 3 or 4 or even full time at the office. So what are you seeing from the employers you're talking to, and also candidates who are working through a recruitment process? What's important to both employers and candidates?
Mm-hmm. Yes, Gary, as you know, that not every role in supply chain can physically be done remotely. Roles that can be done from home are primarily highly analytical roles in supply chain. And of course, companies that have cutting edge technologies, that have cloud-based systems, that invested in their system, can afford onboarding employees remotely and keeping them engaged while they work from home. Also, there are manufacturing roles. There are industries like building material, food manufacturing that are considered essential, and companies are allowed to open their doors and have employees in the office. There are different management style, different environment. You know, some companies, they just want people in the office to make sure these people are working and not wasting time. I know we are in the 21st century, but still, we need to work on trust. And when you are new to the industry, when you are new to the company, they expect you to be in the office at least for 3-4 months when they are training you. They want you to see the facility. Being open to hybrid work environment, or being open to driving to the office, increases your chances. If you are strictly demanding remote work, your chances are much lower, because employers, especially when they don't know you, they still want to see you in person in order to develop that trust and potentially move you into the hybrid or remote work environment. I respect that. Every company, every culture is different. I'm not in the position to judge. I'm in the position to find the right fit, because the right fit may not be the fit that I would do myself, but I look at the priorities and values of both candidates and clients.
One of the arguments for kind of besides I've got a building, it's got a leasehold cost, I've got to kind of sweat the asset, which is sort of an old way of thinking about the world. But one of the arguments made for a return to work, especially for employees who are relatively new to the business, is there is a socialization process. We go through the onboarding, but there's a socialization process, not only for those people new to the job, but often those people are young people, to learn how to work, how the culture works. They learn a lot of things actually by observation, as sort of in an anthropological way, observing interactions and dynamics and doing their job and trying to learn how to do that in an effective way to get results. So that's a pretty strong argument to return to the office. But similarly to the point that you raised earlier around sometimes one of the cultural aspects of why maybe the Great Recession may be happening or not is a sort of fairly toxic work environment. You go in, you have to effectively clock your card and you have to stay a long time. The presenteeism idea or culture that emerges over time. You only seem to be good if you're here till 7 o'clock at night and still sort of trying to do things on your computer or whatever it might be. And I think that we as potential employers in the future, that we need to be very careful, I think, about how we think about the work experience for people, especially those office-based ones. Clearly the ones, the people who are driving trucks, working in factories, filling shelves in stores. So, we can't do that remotely, although some people might try to automate it and attempt to do it remotely. But the more office-based roles that can be performed remotely or in the office, we have to think very carefully about what do we want the work experience to really be, and what type of people do we want to attract. And some of those people, some of the highly talented people we want to bring in to help us through this disruption, get to the other side and be successful, we may have to also accommodate some aspect of their preference to spend more time at home doing the work as opposed to in the office. So it's one of those emerging conundrums, is you can't rely on tools and techniques from the past to say, particularly in the area of employee relations, to say this is how it used to be, this is how it's going to have to be. Returning to the headlines, I'm constantly reading about a talent shortage, a talent war, a talent gap. In fact, I was reading about it in 2018, 2019, when there was still relatively, let's say, modest unemployment. But it seems to be affecting those suffering badly during a lockdown, such as, hospitality, restaurants, non-essential work, retailers trying to find, again, warm bodies to staff their stores. And typically these are at the operative level, and maybe it might creep up to the supervisory or manager level rather than the executive level. So when I think about talent shortages, I'm not talking about people to come in and do effectively a transactional job well. I'm talking about executives who can lead us out of this disruption. Now, if we return to the fact that maybe, I'm proposing it might be a fact that the talent shortage is actually finding warm bodies to do the transactional type of activities, would I be right in assuming it could be about wages and benefits? If you up the wage, you land the people who are efficient at doing what you want them to do, or maybe is there something else in play?
Well, Gary, if I understand your question correctly, so the talent shortage, it's not like that someone is not performing to his or her best because they're not getting enough money. I think that's the attitude that should show up through your work ethics. And if you don't mind, I would like to start with the operational level, where I speak with supervisors and operations manager, and their biggest issue these days is absenteeism. People do not show up for work. And we are talking repetitive tasks, unloading, loading trucks, picking orders. There's a huge demand for employees, for the warehouse employees, and absenteeism is a big issue. So that is definitely shifting priorities for senior executives, because instead of thinking of big picture, they worry about how many people are going to show up this morning to ship out this many important orders to key retailers. So those KPIs get affected, and that's their number one priority. As far as the talent shortage, I think it's because having good technical skills is no longer enough. And we are digging deep into the soft skills, into their ability to present, manage change, influence people, take ownership of their decisions, take ownership of their function. And these are the skills that are very, like you need to speak and meet with a lot of people to identify one or two. And then you need to convince those people to consider your opportunity, and you need to address risks of potential counter offers. So recruiters end up investing a lot of time, effort, and energy into a lengthy hiring process, and then they face the situation when deal falls apart the last minute because candidate chose to stay where they are because of the counter offers. So in this case, money does affect their decision because they need to pay their bills, they need to maintain certain lifestyle. So I don't think we will solve this problem. I contribute a lot by working with students. And I think by working and giving back to the younger generation that is just entering the workforce, we can help them develop those soft skills sooner in their career. We can help them focus on their self-awareness and their ability to plan their career ahead and be more goal-oriented so that we can potentially solve this issue long-term. And that's why I do believe that if you are professional, if you are in the field and you want to give back, talk to younger generation and share your experience, share your insights, and help them identify their strengths sooner in their life rather than later. So I think that's how we can address potential talent shortage. But for now, I think it all comes down to quantity. We need to speak with a lot of people. That's why networking is essential. Recruiters who are very well networked, they have higher chances of finding those unicorns for you. And of course, there are days when I regret that I call myself unicorn expert because that name alone puts a lot of pressure on my performance. But I do my best and, having a lot of conversations every day, investing my time, and sometimes doing work that eventually doesn't get paid. So these are the risks and these are the challenges that I face, but my passion helps me going.
I was wondering underneath that question is it probably tied a little bit back into Great Resignation. There is this statement I sometimes see on LinkedIn: people don't leave companies, people leave bad managers. And I'm just wondering, maybe are we seeing a shift from people with relatively low expectations of their workplace experience actually saying, do you know what, this pandemic's give me a real kick up the butt? And then I need to go and find the kind of companies that I really want to work for, really engaging. Maybe this absenteeism problem is more about the company than the individuals that they employ. Or maybe their recruitment process is mismatched. They're looking for warm bodies when actually should be looking for a very clear cultural fit. The thing that would make the average person go in and kind of say, oh, I just don't fancy going to work today, it's terrible, versus the people that will go, do you know what, this environment, it kind of fits with me and, I can make progress here. So it'd be interesting to see as part of the whole development of work from home, remote working, hybridized work, and these other things that are going on, to see how, when we look back at this time, to think that people did actually uproot or not, and then make some positive changes for their career in the same kind of function, or maybe like you have in the past, to actually take the opportunity to actually completely change direction. I'm going to bundle some general issues together and we can unpick them together within the underlying challenges employers have with their recruitment processes. Firstly, I'm going to blurt these out. Perhaps, if I need to go back, I'll probably pick that up as well. So firstly, what's your view about the virtual recruitment process? I mean, this is interviewing on Teams, Zoom, WebEx, whatever it might be. Is it faster and more efficient and more effective for recruiters and employers, or is it just as let me put an opinion out there, as ineffective as it was before the pandemic? Secondly, are you seeing people wanting to stay put during the period? And you did allude to that people aren't particularly active. If you approach them, maybe they go, no, I'm fine here. I'm not looking to move on during this period of uncertainty. What are your thoughts behind that? Thirdly, Are employers desperate to retain key staff, offering staying bonuses and matching any offers from competitors? I'll give you a well-learned business rule. If somebody wants to leave your company, sometimes it's best to let them leave, because if you try and bribe them to stay, they've already formed an idea in their mind that they want to leave for whatever reason. Maybe it's the atmosphere, the culture, maybe it's that they've got greater expectations and we can facilitate in the short term in this business. And lastly, some of the key criticisms of employers prior to the pandemic was keeping their process on track, their recruitment process, keeping in touch with recruiters like yourself or directly with candidates if they're recruiting directly, and helping candidates with meaningful feedback like, oh, you didn't make it, sorry, you came second, rather than actually you could have improved in these areas and we were looking for this, you didn't actually come across clearly with that. And what do you see, given that we've been in this chaotic situation for 18, 19 months, I might argue a little longer than that, because some of these things were occurring already with the pandemic, and the pandemic just accelerated those. So I'd be interested to sort of beat a path through all these different aspects of the recruitment process to see if we can really get into some gems.
Gary, to the technology aspect of recruitment, Teams and Zoom, I love it. It did speed up the process. And if I ask a candidate, for example, will you be available to meet with them tomorrow at 12? And they ask, oh, no, I can't. Oh, if it's virtual, I can. So yes. Definitely the first and the second step, they happen sooner in the process rather than later. So we can provide candidate with yes or no sooner, and they can move on to other options if they're exploring other opportunities. So definitely I love that part, and I hope it will stay. And also I remember when pandemic started, there were a lot of jokes on how do you onboard people remotely? And we've been in it for so long right now that people get onboarded remotely, and without even going into the office, they resign remotely. So yes. It's like their entire work experience, their entire assignment on the resume happens to be remote. It's fascinating how fast we get used to things that seem so foreign just less than 2 years ago. And I believe that there are benefits of the technology of doing things remotely, and I think those will stay because they do speed up the process. And when it comes to the last stage, most of my clients, they require the candidate to come into the office and look at the facility, meet with people. And in terms of work culture, I think people are more aware of what's going on around them. They talk to their friends. They have more opportunities to browse the social media and see how other companies treat their employees. So they become aware of whether their environment, their culture is toxic or not. They can compare how they're treated to how their friends are treated at their workplaces. So they start looking at the parameters that they used to ignore in the past. Maybe do I have lunch with my team virtually every week like my friend does? Do I need to report when I go to pick up my kids from school, or is my boss open to that? So employees are learning more things about the culture where they used to be. Some of them are happy that they are where they are, and that's why they appreciate it. They are afraid of making a change, not because that opportunity or that industry is not stable. They are not sure if their future boss will support them the same way their current boss is supporting them. They are not sure they will be able to live life as flexible as they are right now, where they know everything. So that, I think, is part of the reason. So those people who suffer in those toxic environments, of course, they are more prone to making a move. But in this case, I always encourage them, if you're that desperate to move, you still need to think carefully and remember about your values and screen for those parameters when you're getting through interviews. Do not be blinded by money. Pay attention to things that are important to you. I do not understand candidates who go out for interviews just for fun and to see if they actually can get a better offer so they can go back to their employer and get a better deal where they are. So definitely be ethical, think things through. Do not initiate the process if you are not 100% sure where you want to move or not. And of course, counter offers, yes, especially in supply chain. And when I started, I said that people lack that recognition. All of a sudden, they become important. And it's difficult to resist that temptation. You've been invisible for so many years, and all of a sudden you're the king of the castle. Everybody wants to keep you. Everybody thinks you're a super important person. They give you money. They I don't know, love bomb you, right? And you need to be strong enough to resist that temptation. That's, I don't know, spiritual practice, I should say. Yeah. They need to have enough self-respect to reflect back and see, why is it taking you so long to recognize that I bring value to the company? So definitely we are all learning. Every professional is in different stage in their career. Some things people need to learn the hard way, but accepting counteroffer is not a good idea, because you already sabotaged your loyalty. If you indicated that you were looking around, you were going out for interviews, you considered other opportunities, even if they don't tell, they will always question your loyalty and your trust. And I've seen how companies who did counteroffer then posted those jobs because they wanted to have backup for this person who all of a sudden may leave, right? So things happen, and if people need to learn them the hard way, sometimes we cannot prevent them from it, whatever works.
And there's a couple of things I'd add to that, is that a number of people who have been in transition I've talked to, sometimes the process is incredibly extended, and it can be 6, 7, 8, 9, 10, even 10 interviews. So if you think about the preparation as a candidate for an interview, it might be a whole day. Mm-hmm. So when you romp into your boss's virtual office, I guess, say, hey, I've got this. And if you think that they think, oh, somebody just phoned you up and said, could you come and work over here? It doesn't work like that. The manager will think, you've probably spent a good proportion of the time that I've expected you to work. Feathering your own nest might be a way of expressing it. You weren't doing stuff. I trusted you to do this. The employer may succumb. You may be in a very critical role at this particular time, maybe on a project which is so close to go live. I can't, honestly, I can't get somebody in and learn all you've got in this time and deliver this project. So it may be in my short-term interest to do something to keep you here. But there's two things that are going on. One is the candidates already at one level left the company. It's just a question of a paperwork that needs to catch up with them. And when the employer is confronted with, oh, I'm leaving the company, I've really enjoyed it here, but I am moving on. They've made me a better office, I'm going. That's one way of approaching it. But if you turn around and go, well, do you want to make me an offer? An employer will never forgive you for that. They may come to terms with it in the short term, but the longer term, medium term, they will be looking at you and thinking, you deserted me in my moment of need. I ended up having to bribe you to stay. That will rancor with many managers. They will not treat you the way that you would expect to be treated. Short term, to the point you made, you love bombed them out. I love that. But the reality is that will sit in the back of somebody's mind when there is a genuine promotional opportunity arising, which had you have not done this and you would have been seriously contended for it and even won it, you will be overlooked. Yes, you will be forced out of that organization in the end. The cultural or the relationship between you and your manager, maybe even the colleagues, you will find that that's an intolerable situation over time.
Yes, of course. And that is not healthy for the entire team, for the entire group. They start questioning, why were you about to leave? And that certainly is not helping the engagement of the team. Gary, I want to, again, go back to the headhunt, because I work on complex roles and I normally do not rely on applicants, because companies that I work with, they demand exact match. Sometimes they want me to consider candidates from their competitors. So definitely people who are happily employed, they do not respond. They are not interested in making a change. So as I said, statistics shows that for me, for example, to present 2 or 3 decent candidates, I need to speak with dozens of people. That definitely puts some pressure on recruiters, because companies, they think if they pay us fee and they are used to pre-pandemic numbers. Right now, they expect the same 5, 6, 7 people, but I do not like to send candidates for the sake of sending candidates. I prefer to focus on quality and not quantity. That's why my numbers are not where probably they used to be. It's maybe 2, 3, maximum 4 candidates, depending on the role. And that, you'll be surprised, is across all areas of supply chain. Purchasing within manufacturing environment, logistics coordinators, logistics directors, managers, operations managers. Maybe companies are doing something right to retain their talent. And I see how many professionals get promoted internally during these tough months. They get better title, maybe, I hope, better pay, but companies are exploring different opportunities to retain their in-house talent. There's also hidden job market that I've been talking a lot about lately. Job market that is not visible. People need to fill jobs and they tap into their network before they post the job. As I said, the response rate, it used to be maybe 50, 60%. Now it's less than 20. So for us to keep up the numbers and meet those high expectations of us as recruiters, we need to do twice as much work. And given those counteroffer situation and people not willing to change, we have higher risks of losing those opportunities, or even companies promoting people from within or hiring themselves. We have definitely higher risks of losing an opportunity to fill the job, which is not an easy challenge for recruiters, because we still invest a lot of energy, time, and money into that search process. Yeah. And being an entrepreneur, it's something that if someone ever thought of becoming an entrepreneur, ask yourself a question: am I willing to do this job for free? If the answer is no, do not go into that business. Because if, for example, in recruitment, you need to give yourself a few years to get to the point where you make enough money to justify the expense and efforts that you put into that.
Yes, I can imagine. Is there anything else that you'd like to share and maybe even discuss before we bring it to a close? It's been an excellent conversation.
Thank you, Gary. I also want to ask you a question. What I feel from my clients is a very high sense of urgency. When I get a new role, I put very sometimes unrealistic goals, and I excel and I strive to fulfill them, because urgency is essential for supply chain, for recruitment. The faster you supply the candidates, the higher the chances are. What do you see? Because we've been talking about change management and how companies need to change their culture, how they need to change their hiring process, because maybe the cultural fit they were screening for is no longer relevant to the situation they're in. Maybe they need to completely change their hiring strategy and consider talent that they would not consider in the past, because company needs new ideas. Company needs to get to the next level. Do you see from your clients, are they resistant to change? What challenges you face as an expert consultant?
Yeah, I mean, how long have we got? Yes, I think when I think about Canada, and particularly retailers, are probably going to get slaughtered for this. For the last 18 months, I see them doing lots of expediting things, so, running around in a massive firefight. And I think for the first few months, that was a necessary skill set they needed. They needed guys on the ground doing things, getting things done. Forget about all the admin, just get the shelves full, get the drivers out the yard, get the trucks full. Those are essential qualities that are required as we went into the pandemic, as we went into lockdown and restrictions. But 18 months on, I think it kind of suckered into this. We were probably doing firefighting before the pandemic. It became much more of an enhanced skill. And there was a cultural value that sat behind that if you ran around like a headless chicken, but your boss thought you were doing a good job because you were energetic at it, you were typically at least recognized, if not rewarded. But it's a shame that the boss didn't actually say, I'm not employing firefighters, I'm employing people who can outthink this problem and actually take us to another place that makes us much more resilient, allows us to build proper capabilities, proper capacities, so that we have options in the future. Rushing around doesn't look to me like an efficient kind of mindset. You're not really thinking about this. And I think that we've maybe before we were what we call risk averse, when we think about Canadian business, quite, risk averse. But I think the pandemic's actually made us probably quite more risk averse rather than more open to change. And of course, there's lots of exceptions. I'm sure that if somebody's listening to hear from, Walmart, certainly, Amazon, certainly, Loblaw, certainly. And as we go down the size of companies down to independents, we would certainly find they've changed their mindset. But this thing in the middle that probably occupies a lot of employment opportunities, they are still recruiting against, maybe, and I would suggest, job specs which may be existing in the 2010s, maybe before, just dust it off, have a look at it, change a few words. They haven't made that transition. They haven't made that transition to what does the world of the future look like, and what are the skill sets, what are the cultural values that we need to now engender. And that might mean losing a few of the people that we used to reward for doing certain things. Those certain things are no longer the behavioral pattern that we want to go forward. We want highly intellectual people who can actually outthink the problem and, importantly, execute against that. And that's a bit I still struggle to see. I can see lots of people doing lots of tactical and operational things. If I walk into pretty much any operation, I see people running around, being very energetic in today's world. What I'm not bumping into too often is people who can really outthink that problem, really strategic in their mindset, and can actually take a business to a completely different place than it has existed for many years. If the fundamental process by which value is created in an organization, in retail it's getting stuff onto shelves and doing a bit of e-commerce, whatever it might be, and manufacturing, it's making things in a certain way. If the cultural values that underpin that, which may have been successful in the past, if they're not now attacked internally and changed up, because the world is going to be different. And it's still, we've only had 18 months of this. I think we've got at least 18 months, 24 months, maybe 36 months. The more I talk to people about that, they're way ahead of me or somewhere. It might take 3 or 4 years to unravel this. Now, if that becomes a fact, we better be doing the hard work now, because we should have been doing it before the pandemic. Admittedly, the pandemic's created a lot of uncertainty, and that should have given rise to somebody standing back going, hey, I wonder if this is going to last a bit longer in the next couple of weeks. Because if it is, we need to start making some big changes here. And that includes maybe losing some people along the way, people who've been very successful as we've regarded them. But as we go forward, they will not be successful. They will hold us back. They can't unlearn what we did to learn new things. So I think that we've got a really exciting time ahead of us. It may feel very bewildering to many people, but I think it's going to be very exciting.
Even right now, that division and disruptions that happen in the technology, people start questioning work from home when it comes to sensitive information, when it comes to certain data that people have accessibility to when they work from home. So those things do not help the remote work environment. Some companies will use that as an argument for forcing their people to come to the office. And of course, there are different restrictions that go with that. You are absolutely right. We are entering interesting times. We are in those times right now, and change is required. And I think also self-awareness is something that employers are looking for in candidates. And that's something that we need to be creative as recruiters in terms of how we screen for those skills. And more importantly, we need to work on those skills in ourselves.
Yes.
And I believe that every single person is talented. It's just the quest of the entire life to find where your talent is and how you can use it to help other people. One of those reasons I went into recruitment, I want people to be happy. I want people to be employed. I want to live in the society where people go to work. They can afford lifestyle where their kids get education, where they can afford going to restaurants, attending exhibitions, traveling. And they can only do it if they have good employment, rewarding employment. And if I can play a small role in that, in helping society to become better, that makes my life meaningful. That's the fulfillment I was looking for. And I think I found it. So.
Excellent. On that note, I'd like to thank you for sharing your thoughts and your time today to perhaps give people who are listening in some insights as to what's going on in today's recruitment process, and perhaps the areas that employers will start to take more notice of as they move into the, let's call it the post-pandemic era, and people take some stuff away from this conversation, and it's all positive. So thank you ever so much, Tatiana, for sharing with me today. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Gary. Thanks for inviting, and thank you everyone for watching this conversation. I hope you liked it.
Thank you for listening today. I hope the information has been valuable for you and your team. You can connect with me via the website retail.ca and go to the contact page, or via LinkedIn by typing linkedin.com/in/last-mile. Look forward to hearing from you and playing an active part with your supply chain and your business's transformation as you start to act boldly, think big, scale, adapt, and win.